The fluorescent light in my workshop buzzed like an angry wasp as I hunched over my laptop, reviewing tomorrow's construction estimates. 23 years of marriage, and I still found more peace in this cluttered garage than anywhere else in the house. The smell of sawdust and motor oil had become my sanctuary. "David!" Sarah's voice cut through the evening air like a circular saw through pine. "David, get in here right now!" I didn't look up from the screen. After 2 decades of these performances, I could predict the script. Something I'd done wrong, something I'd forgotten, something that made her life harder. The tone told me everything. This wasn't a request. "David!" Sharper this time. I saved the file and closed the laptop with deliberate slowness. Through the workshop's single window, I could see our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, watering her petunias, probably straining to catch whatever drama was about to unfold. In a town like Millfield, entertainment came in the form of other people's misery. Sarah appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the kitchen light. Even in shadow, I could read her body language, hands on hips, weight shifted to one foot, jaw set in that familiar line of righteous indignation. "Did you hear me calling you?" "Hard not to. I think they heard you 3 blocks over." She stepped into the workshop, and the overhead light caught her face. At 42, Sarah was still beautiful in that sharp, architectural way that had first attracted me. Clean lines, perfect angles, everything precisely calculated. But beauty without warmth was just good engineering. "Don't be smart with me, David. I'm not in the mood." "When are you ever?" Her eyes flashed. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your attitude, your constant sarcasm. I can't even have a conversation with you anymore." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "What conversation? You called me in here to lecture me about something. That's not a conversation. That's a performance review." "Maybe because you need one." She crossed her arms. "Mrs. Henderson called me today. She said you were rude to her nephew Brady at the hardware store." Brady. Of course. Sarah's cousin's golden boy, the real estate hotshot who drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than I made in a week. The kind of guy who'd never had calluses on his hands or grease under his fingernails. I wasn't rude. I told him the truth about that property on Elm Street. The foundation's shot, and anyone with half a brain can see it. "He's trying to make a living, David, just like you." "No, not just like me. I make my living by doing honest work. He makes his by convincing people to buy garbage at premium prices." Sarah's laugh was cold. "Honest work? You mean manual labor? There's a difference between building something and creating something of value." The words hit like a slap. 23 years, and she still saw me as less than. The college-educated architect married to the high school dropout contractor. The Beauty and the Beast. Except in her version, I never transformed into anything better. I create plenty of value, this house, for instance. The one you live in rent-free while you design office buildings for rich people. My work requires actual skill, David, education, vision, not just following blueprints someone else drew. Right, because swinging a hammer is so easy, any idiot can do it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I stood up, suddenly tired of this familiar dance. Is this going somewhere, or are we just revisiting your greatest hits? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper I knew too well. I'll tell you where this is going. I'm sick of your attitude. I'm sick of your jealousy. And I'm especially sick of you embarrassing me in front of people who matter. People who matter? You mean people with money? I mean people with class. People with ambition. People who don't spend their evenings hiding in a garage, feeling sorry for themselves. The workshop fell silent, except for that buzzing fluorescent light. Outside, Mrs. Patterson had moved on to her roses, but I could feel her attention like a weight. You know what, David? Sarah's voice carried a note of finality. I've had enough for one night. Tonight you're sleeping on the couch. The words hung in the air between us. Her trump card, played with the satisfaction of someone who thought they held all the power. The couch, her way of putting me in my place, making me the dog banished from the master bedroom. But something had shifted inside me during her little speech. Maybe it was the way she'd dismissed my work, my life, my worth. Maybe it was the casual cruelty of reducing 23 years of marriage to a real estate transaction. Or maybe I was just tired of being the villain in her story. I closed my laptop with a soft click and looked at her directly. No. The word came out calm, almost conversational. Sarah blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. Excuse me? I said no. Tonight you're sleeping somewhere else. Pack and get out. Her confident expression wavered. What? You heard me. Leave. Now. For a moment, she looked genuinely confused, like someone had changed the channel in the middle of her favorite show. David, what are you talking about? This is my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. This house was mine before we got married, and it's mine now. You want to sleep somewhere else? Great. You've got options. Brady's place, maybe. I hear he's got a nice setup downtown. The color drained from her face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not as stupid as you think I am. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, Sarah was speechless. It was almost worth the 23 years of marriage just to see that expression. You've got 30 minutes, I said, turning back to my laptop. Take whatever you need, but don't take anything that's mine. David, you can't be serious. I opened a new file and started typing. 29 minutes. She stood there for another few seconds, waiting for me to back down, to apologize, to return to the script. When I didn't, she turned and walked toward the house, her heels clicking on the concrete like a countdown timer. Through the window, I watched Mrs. Patterson abandon all pretense and move closer to the fence. By tomorrow morning, the whole neighborhood would know that David Mitchell had finally grown a spine. I kept typing, but I wasn't really seeing the numbers on the screen. Instead, I was thinking about Brady Henderson and his BMW, about Sarah's late nights at the office, about the way she'd been checking her phone constantly for the past 6 months. 29 minutes to pack up 23 years. It seemed about right. Sarah's car disappeared down Maple Street at 11:47 p.m., her taillights fading into the darkness like dying embers. I stood at the living room window, watching until even the sound of her engine was swallowed by the night. The house felt different already, bigger somehow, but also emptier. I'd expected to feel something dramatic, relief maybe, or regret. Instead, I just felt tired. The couch sat in the middle of the room like evidence of a crime. How many nights had she banished me there? How many times had I accepted that punishment without question? I couldn't even remember what most of those fights had been about. Probably nothing worth sleeping on a lumpy sofa. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. This is insane. Call me when you come to your senses. I deleted it without responding. The house was too quiet. 23 years of shared space, and now every sound seemed amplified. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the old floorboards settling, the tick of the grandfather clock Sarah had insisted on buying but never bothered to wind. I wandered through the rooms like a stranger in my own home. The master bedroom still smelled like her perfume, something expensive that she'd started wearing about 6 months ago. The closet was half empty now, hangers scattered on the floor where she'd grabbed clothes in her rush to leave. On her nightstand sat a small jewelry box I'd never paid much attention to. Inside, beneath a tangle of earrings and bracelets, I found something that made my stomach drop. A key, small, brass, with a plastic tag marked Sunset Motel Room 12. I sat on the edge of the bed, turning the key over in my hands. The Sunset Motel was the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen. Truckers catching a few hours of sleep, teenagers with nowhere else to go, and apparently, married women meeting their lovers. The jewelry box held other secrets, credit card statements I'd never seen, showing charges at restaurants I'd never been to, a business card for a spa in the city, couples massage therapy written in flowing script, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper like a precious treasure, a burner phone. My hands shook as I powered it on. The screen filled with messages, dozens of them, all from a contact listed simply as B. Can't wait to see you tonight. Sarah, you're incredible. Best decision I ever made. Your husband doesn't deserve you. You know that, right? Room 12. Same as always, I'll be waiting. The timestamps went back months. While I'd been working 12-hour days to pay for her lifestyle, she'd been building another life entirely. The late nights at the office, the weekend trips to visit her sister, the sudden interest in yoga classes that ran until midnight. I scrolled through the messages, each one a small knife twist. Photos, too. Sarah in lingerie I'd never seen, posing in hotel rooms I'd never been to. And Brady, because of course it was Brady, looking smug and satisfied in ways that made me want to put my fist through the wall. One message stood out from the rest, sent just 3 days ago. David's getting suspicious. We might need to cool it for a while. Brady's response, or you could just leave him. You know you want to. Sarah, it's complicated. The house, the money, everything's tied up. Brady, so we'll figure it out. I make enough for both of us. Sarah, I know. I just need more time. Brady, time for what? You said yourself he's a loser. What are you waiting for? I set the phone down carefully, afraid I might crush it in my grip. A loser. 23 years of marriage, and that's how she described me to her lover. Not, it's complicated or I care about him, but just a loser. The bedroom walls seemed to close in around me. I needed air, space, somewhere to think. I grabbed the phone and headed back to the workshop, where the smell of sawdust and motor oil might wash away the scent of betrayal. Outside, the neighborhood was dark except for a few porch lights and the blue glow of late-night television. Mrs. Patterson's house was quiet, but I had no doubt she'd be up early tomorrow, ready to spread whatever gossip she'd managed to collect. In the workshop, I sat at my workbench and continued reading. The messages painted a picture of a relationship that was already more serious than my marriage had been in years. Plans for weekend getaways, talk of moving in together, discussions about my inadequacies that made my teeth ache. He doesn't even try anymore, Sarah had written. No ambition, no passion, just work and TV and that stupid workshop. That stupid workshop. The place where I'd built furniture for our first apartment, where I'd crafted a crib for the baby we'd lost in the 3rd trimester 15 years ago, where I'd retreated when the grief threatened to swallow us both, and where I'd stayed when it became clear that Sarah blamed me for not being strong enough to hold us together. But the messages revealed something else, too. For all her complaints about my lack of ambition, Sarah was careful about money. She'd been slowly moving funds from our joint savings account into a personal account I'd never known about. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger attention, but steady and deliberate. The business card for the spa wasn't random either. According to the messages, Brady had been treating her to regular sessions there. Expensive ones, paid for with cash, so they wouldn't show up on any statements I might see. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the workbench. 23 years of marriage, and I'd been living with a stranger. Someone who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck and a place to sleep while she built a real life with someone else. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the calculation behind it. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake that had spiraled out of control. This was a planned exit strategy, complete with financial preparation and emotional backup. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. On the 4th call, I finally answered. What? David, we need to talk. Her voice was different now, softer, more vulnerable. the tone she used when she wanted something. "I think we've talked enough for one night. Please, I know you're upset, but you're not thinking clearly. We can work this out." "Can we? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been working on a different kind of solution." Silence on the other end. Then, "What's that supposed to mean?" "Room 12, Sarah. Ring any bells?" The silence stretched longer this time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "David, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You're good at explaining things, like how my work doesn't require skill, or how I'm a loser who doesn't deserve you. You read the messages. Every single one, very educational. It's not what you think." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's exactly what I think. The only question is how long it's been going on. David, please, come pick me up. We'll go somewhere and talk this through like adults." "Where are you?" Another pause. "I'm at Brady's." Of course she was. "Well, that saves us both some time, doesn't it? You're already where you want to be." "It's not like that. I just needed somewhere to go, and he offered—" "Sarah," I cut her off. "Stop. Just stop talking." "But 23 years, I said quietly. 23 years I've listened to you explain why everything is my fault, why I'm not good enough, smart enough, ambitious enough. I'm done listening." I hung up and turned off the phone. The workshop fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not empty, but expectant. Like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air itself seems to hold its breath. I picked up the burner phone and scrolled through the messages one more time. Brady's smug face grinned at me from a dozen photos, his arm around my wife, his hand on her body, his lips pressed against hers in hotel rooms paid for with money I'd earned. Tomorrow, the whole town would be talking about how David Mitchell had finally snapped and thrown his wife out. They'd shake their heads and wonder what had taken me so long. Some would take her side, poor Sarah, married to that angry man who couldn't appreciate what he had. Others would nod knowingly and mutter about women who thought they were too good for their husbands. But none of them would know the whole story. None of them would understand that this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. I opened my laptop and started typing. If Sarah wanted to play games, she was about to learn that she wasn't the only one who could plan ahead. The next morning brought rain and gossip in equal measure. I watched from the kitchen window as Mrs. Patterson made her rounds, stopping at each neighbor's house with the dedication of a postal worker. By 8 a.m., she'd hit every house on our side of the street. By 9 a.m., she'd crossed over and started on the other side. My phone had been buzzing since dawn. Missed calls from Sarah, from her sister Linda, from Brady himself. I'd turned it off after the first few and focused on coffee and the morning news. The world kept spinning, even when your personal universe collapsed. The doorbell rang at 9:30. Through the peephole, I saw Linda standing on my porch, her arms crossed and her face set in that same righteous expression Sarah wore when she was about to deliver a lecture. The family resemblance was strong. Both women had perfected the art of making you feel guilty for existing. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "David." Her voice was crisp with disapproval. "We need to talk." "Good morning to you too, Linda." "Don't." She held up a hand. "I'm not here for pleasantries. Sarah called me this morning crying. She told me what you did." "What I did? That's interesting. What exactly did she say I did?" Linda's eyes narrowed. "You threw her out of her own home in the middle of the night, over some ridiculous fight about her cousin." I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly curious about how Sarah had spun the story. "Is that what she told you?" "Are you saying it's not true?" "I'm saying that's not the whole truth. But then, your sister's never been big on complete honesty." "What's that supposed to mean?" I studied Linda's face, looking for any sign that she knew about Brady, about the affair, about the months of planning and deception. but her indignation seemed genuine. Sarah had played the victim card perfectly, leaving out the inconvenient details that might complicate the narrative. "It means your sister's been having an affair, Linda, for months, with Brady Henderson." The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually stepped backward, her hand going to her chest. That's not possible. "Room 12 at the Sunset Motel. I've got the key if you want to check it out yourself." Linda's face cycled through several expressions: shock, denial, anger, and finally, a kind of resigned sadness that told me she'd suspected something, but hadn't wanted to face it. "Even if that's true," she said quietly, "throwing her out wasn't the answer. You should have talked to her, tried to work things out." "Talked to her?" "Linda, your sister thinks I'm a loser who doesn't deserve her. She's been planning her exit strategy for months, moving money around, setting up her new life. The only reason she hasn't left already is because she's trying to figure out how to take half of everything I own." "You don't know that." I pulled out the burner phone and scrolled to one of Brady's messages. "Here. Don't worry about the house. My lawyer says we can force a sale, split the proceeds. He'll end up with nothing." Linda read the message, her face growing paler with each word. "Brady sent that to your sister 3 weeks ago," I continued, "right after she'd been to see a divorce attorney downtown. Want to see the credit card statement for that consultation?" She handed the phone back without a word. "So, no, Linda. I didn't throw her out over some ridiculous fight. I threw her out because I got tired of being married to someone who was already planning to divorce me and take everything I've worked for." The rain picked up, drumming against the porch roof. Linda stood there getting wet, but she didn't seem to notice. "What are you going to do now?" she asked finally. "I don't know yet, but I'm done being the nice guy who takes whatever punishment gets handed out." She nodded slowly, like someone waking up from a long dream. "David, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "I know you didn't. Sarah's good at managing her image. What can I do?" The question surprised me. I'd expected Linda to defend her sister regardless of the evidence, the way family usually did, but she looked genuinely shaken, like someone who'd just learned that gravity worked differently than they'd thought. "Nothing," I said. "This is between Sarah and me. But if you need anything, I'll be fine." She turned to leave, then stopped. "David, for what it's worth, I never thought you were a loser. You're a good man who got dealt a bad hand." After she left, I sat in the kitchen and tried to figure out my next move. The house felt different in daylight, not empty anymore, but full of potential. Like a construction site after the demolition crew had finished, ready for something new to be built. My phone rang. I'd turned it back on to check for work calls, and now I was paying the price. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. This time, I answered. "What do you want?" "I want to come home." Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. "David, please, we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix. It's broken beyond repair." "That's not true." "Yes, I made a mistake." "A mistake? Sarah, you've been planning to leave me for months. You've been stealing money from our accounts. You've been meeting your lawyer to figure out how to take half of everything I own. That's not a mistake, that's a business plan." Silence. "I found the phone, Sarah, all of it. The messages, the photos, the financial planning. I know about the motel room, the spa treatments, the whole thing." When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more calculating. The victim act was over. "Fine. So what happens now? Now you live with your choices. And you think you're going to come out of this looking like the hero? David, I can make your life very difficult. More difficult than finding out my wife's been cheating on me for months? I'd like to see you try. I have friends in this town. People who matter. People who can make sure you never get another construction contract." The threat hung in the air between us. Sarah's nuclear option, use her connections to destroy my livelihood, force me into submission through economic warfare. You know what, Sarah? Go ahead. Try it. See how many of your friends stick around when they find out what kind of person you really are. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not the only one with secrets to spill. I hung up and turned off the phone again. But the damage was done. Sarah had shown her true colors, and now I knew exactly what kind of fight this was going to be. She wanted to play hardball? Fine. But she was about to learn that 23 years of marriage had taught me a few things about her vulnerabilities too. I opened my laptop and started making a list. By Thursday, the battle lines were drawn. Sarah had made good on her threat, and the results were swift and brutal. 3 clients canceled their contracts within 2 days, citing scheduling conflicts and budget concerns that fooled no one. The 4th, Mrs. Brennan, was more honest. "David, I'm sorry," she said over the phone. "You do good work, but Sarah's got connections at the bank where my husband works. We can't afford to make waves right now." I sat in my truck outside the hardware store, watching Brady Henderson load lumber into his BMW, an absurd sight that would have been funny under different circumstances. He moved with the careful precision of someone who'd never done real physical labor, treating each board like it might bite him. He saw me watching and had the audacity to wave. I got out of the truck. Brady's confident smile flickered when he realized I was walking toward him. He straightened up, puffing out his chest in a display of dominance that might have been intimidating if he hadn't been wearing a polo shirt and khakis to load lumber. "David," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. You?" "Can't complain." He gestured at the lumber. "Just picking up some materials for a client, investment property downtown." "The old Morrison place?" "That's right." His chest puffed out a little more. "Buyers planning to flip it, turn it into condos." I nodded thoughtfully. "Good luck with that." "Thanks." He seemed surprised by my reasonable tone. "Listen, David, about Sarah." "What about her?" "I know this is awkward, but I want you to know it wasn't planned. These things just happen sometimes." These things. Like adultery was a natural disaster, something that struck without warning or human agency. "You're right," I said. "Sometimes they do." Brady relaxed slightly. "I'm glad you're taking this so well. Sarah was worried you might do something dramatic." "Dramatic? Like what?" "You know, make a scene, try to cause trouble." I smiled. "Brady, I'm a simple guy. I build things, fix things, solve problems. I don't do drama." "That's good to hear. But I am curious about something." "What's that?" "How long did you know the Morrison place has a sinkhole under the foundation?" The color drained from his face. "What?" "The sinkhole. About 12 feet across, right under the southeast corner. The previous owner tried to hide it with some creative landscaping, but it's definitely there. Any structural engineer worth his license would spot it in 5 minutes." Brady's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Your buyer doesn't know, does he?" I continued conversationally. "That's why you're buying the lumber yourself instead of having it delivered to the site. Don't want any contractors taking a close look at the foundation. That's not fraud, Brady. That's the word you're looking for. Selling a property with known structural defects without disclosure. The state takes that pretty seriously." He dropped the board he'd been holding. It hit the pavement with a sharp crack that made both of us jump. "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to prove anything. I just have to make a phone call to the building inspector. Anonymous tip about possible foundation issues. He'll be out there tomorrow morning with a ground-penetrating radar unit." Brady's face cycled through several shades of pale. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop using my wife to destroy my business." "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a screenshot I'd taken from Sarah's burner. "Here's a text from yesterday. Brady says we need to hit him harder. Go after the Kellerman contract next." He stared at the screen like it was a snake about to strike. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued. You're going to call off the dogs. Tell Sarah to back off. Let me make my living in peace. And if I don't? Then tomorrow morning, the building inspector gets a very detailed anonymous tip about the Morrison place, and maybe a few other properties you've moved recently. Amazing what you can spot from the street when you know what to look for. Brady's hands were shaking now. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. There's a difference. I turned to walk away, then stopped. Oh, and Brady? If you ever wave at me again, I'll assume you're asking for another conversation, and next time, I might not be feeling so diplomatic. I left him standing in the parking lot, surrounded by scattered lumber and the wreckage of his confidence. The next morning, Sarah called before 7 a.m. What did you do to Brady? Good morning to you too. I'm fine, thanks for asking. David, I'm serious. He's terrified. He thinks you're going to ruin him. I'm not going to ruin him, but I'm not going to let him ruin me either. This has to stop. We're adults. We can work this out without destroying each other. You should have thought of that before you decided to wage economic warfare against me. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. No, Sarah, you said exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect me to fight back. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more calculating. What do you want? I want you to leave me alone. Stop interfering with my business. Stop trying to turn our friends against me. Go live your new life and let me live mine. And in return? In return, I don't share your private messages with the whole town. I don't tell everyone about your financial planning and your exit strategy. I don't make you famous in ways you won't enjoy. Another pause. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. Fine. But this goes both ways, David. You leave Brady alone, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. What kind of man am I, Sarah? The kind who threatens people. The kind who uses intimidation to get his way. I laughed. Intimidation? Sarah, I had a conversation with your boyfriend in a public parking lot. If that intimidates him, maybe he's not the alpha male you thought he was. The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Sarah? I'm here. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Fine, we have a deal. But David? Yeah? This isn't over. She hung up, but I wasn't worried. For the first time in months, I felt like I was playing offense instead of defense. Sarah had spent so long thinking of me as a passive victim that she'd forgotten I knew how to fight. But she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. I made myself coffee and sat down at my laptop. Time to do some research. If Sarah wanted to play games, I needed to understand all the players, and Brady Henderson, it turned out, had been a very busy man. 3 weeks later, the Millfield Community Center buzzed with the kind of energy that only comes from good gossip and free food. The annual neighborhood barbecue was supposed to be a celebration of community spirit, but it had devolved into something more primitive, a gladiatorial arena where social status was measured in whispered conversations and meaningful glances. I hadn't planned to attend. The last thing I wanted was to spend an evening surrounded by people who'd been discussing my marriage like it was their favorite television show. But Linda had called that morning with news that changed everything. David, you need to know something. Sarah's planning to make a scene tonight. What kind of scene? She's been telling people you've been harassing her, threatening Brady. She's going to ask for a restraining order. I sat in my truck across the street from the community center, watching neighbors stream through the entrance. Sarah's BMW was parked near the front, along with Brady's ridiculous lumber-hauling sedan. They'd arrived together, making their relationship public for the first time. The smart move would be to drive away, let Sarah have her moment of public sympathy, and deal with the legal consequences later. But I was tired of being smart. Tired of taking the high road while everyone else wallowed in the mud. I got out of the truck and walked toward the entrance. The community center was decorated with red, white, and blue streamers that looked like they'd been recycled from the 4th of July, Long tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes, and a DJ who looked old enough to have spun records at the original Woodstock was playing classic rock at a volume that suggested his hearing aids needed adjustment. Conversation stopped when I walked in. Not obviously, people were too polite for that, but I could feel the shift in energy, the way attention focused on me like a spotlight. Mrs. Patterson practically vibrated with excitement, her eyes darting between me and Sarah like she was watching a tennis match. Sarah stood near the dessert table, surrounded by a cluster of women who nodded sympathetically as she spoke. She looked beautiful in a calculated way, the perfect victim, brave enough to attend a community event despite her terrible circumstances. Brady hovered nearby, playing the protective boyfriend with all the subtlety of a dinner theater actor. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and found a quiet corner where I could observe without being obvious about it. The evening played out like a carefully choreographed performance. Sarah worked the room with the skill of a politician, accepting condolences and sharing carefully edited versions of our story. Brady played his part too, the successful businessman who'd rescued a damsel in distress. It was almost impressive in a sociopathic way. David. A voice beside me made me turn. Tom Kellerman, one of the clients Sarah had convinced to cancel his contract, stood there holding a beer and looking uncomfortable. Tom. Listen, about the deck project. Don't worry about it, I understand. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. It's not that I don't trust your work. You know that, right? It's just complicated. Everything's complicated these days. Sarah said you've been having some problems? Drinking, maybe? Anger issues? I took a sip of my beer and studied his face. What do you think, Tom? Do I seem drunk to you? Angry? He looked embarrassed. No, you seem fine. But she was pretty convincing. I'm sure she was. Tom glanced around the room, then leaned closer. For what it's worth, I never bought the whole story. Sarah always struck me as ambitious. That's one word for it. If you ever want to talk about that deck project again, I'll let you know. He nodded and melted back into the crowd, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my beer. Across the room, Sarah caught my eye and smiled, a cold, triumphant expression that said she thought she'd already won. The evening dragged on. I made small talk with neighbors who couldn't decide whether to treat me like a victim or a pariah. I ate potato salad that tasted like cardboard and listened to the DJ play the same Eagles song for the third time. All the while, I felt the weight of expectation, the sense that everyone was waiting for something dramatic to happen. At 8:30, Sarah made her move. She walked to the front of the room and tapped a spoon against her wine glass until the conversations died down. The DJ took the hint and turned off the music. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice carrying just the right note of nervous vulnerability. But I wanted to thank everyone for their support during this difficult time. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. As many of you know, my husband and I are going through a separation. These things are never easy, but they're especially hard when they involve concerning behavior. She paused, letting the implications sink in. I don't want to go into details, but I've been forced to take legal action to protect myself and my friend Brady from harassment and threats. All eyes turned to me. I stood in my corner, beer in hand, feeling like a defendant at a trial I hadn't known I was attending. I just want everyone to know that if you see or hear anything that concerns you, please don't hesitate to call the police. Sometimes people we thought we knew can become unpredictable. The room fell completely silent. Even the old DJ seemed to be holding his breath. Sarah looked directly at me, her expression a masterpiece of wounded dignity and brave determination. I hope we can all move forward in a spirit of peace and healing. She set down her wine glass and started to turn away, her performance complete. That's when I started laughing. Not a bitter chuckle or a sarcastic snort, but genuine, deep belly laughter, that echoed off the community center walls. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and Sarah froze mid-step. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping my eyes. "That was just... wow. Really well done, Sarah. You should consider a career in politics." The room buzzed with uncomfortable energy. This wasn't in the script. "David," Brady stepped forward, puffing out his chest, "I think you should leave." "Should I?" "This is a community event, Brady. I'm part of the community. At least I was until my wife decided to destroy my business and my reputation." "That's not what happened," Sarah said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Isn't it?" I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Because I've got some interesting messages here that tell a different story." Sarah's face went pale. "You can't..." "Can't what? Share the truth? Tell everyone about room 12 at the Sunset Motel? About how you've been planning this whole thing for months?" The crowd leaned forward like flowers turning toward the sun. This was better than cable television. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, warming to my theme, "let me tell you about my wife's definition of harassment. Apparently it's harassment when I discover she's been having an affair. It's harassment when I find out she's been stealing money from our joint accounts. And it's definitely harassment when I refuse to quietly disappear while she and her boyfriend destroy my livelihood." "Stop," Sarah whispered, but the word was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. "Oh, and Brady?" I turned to face him directly. "How's that Morrison place working out? Foundation holding up okay?" Brady's face went through several interesting color changes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just like you don't know about the 3 other properties you flipped this year with undisclosed structural issues. Amazing how much you can learn when you start asking the right questions." The crowd was fully engaged now, heads swiveling back and forth like they were watching a tennis match. Mrs. Patterson looked like she might faint from excitement. Sarah tried to regain control. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Threats, intimidation." "Intimidation?" I laughed again. "Sarah, the only thing I've intimidated is your carefully constructed narrative. See, you made one crucial mistake in all your planning." "What's that?" "You forgot that I actually know you. The real you, not the victim you're playing tonight." I walked to the center of the room, feeling the weight of every gaze. You want to know what harassment looks like? It looks like a woman who spends months planning to destroy her husband's life while pretending to work on their marriage. It looks like someone who uses their connections to sabotage their spouse's business out of spite. It looks like a person who stands in front of their neighbors and lies about being threatened when the only thing that's been threatened is their ability to rewrite history. The room was dead silent now. "So yes, Sarah, let's talk about moving forward in a spirit of peace and healing. Let's start by telling the truth about who's really been the victim in this marriage." I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on the nearest table. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. And Sarah, next time you want to destroy someone's reputation, you might want to make sure your own can stand up to scrutiny." I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting in front of me like I was Moses crossing the Red Sea. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of conversation as everyone started talking at once. Outside, the night air felt cool against my skin. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching through the windows as Sarah tried desperately to regain control of the narrative. But it was too late. The truth was out, and in a town like Millfield, truth spread faster than wildfire. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Holy shit! Did you really just do that?" I smiled and started the engine. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the victim, not the villain, just a man who'd finally decided to fight back. Sarah had wanted a war. Now she had one. But as I drove home through the quiet streets of Millfield, I realized something important. I'd already won. Not because I'd humiliated her in front of our neighbors, but because I'd finally stopped caring what anyone else thought about my life. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like home. I sat on the front porch and looked up at the stars, thinking about tomorrow. There would be consequences for tonight's performance.